There are moments in life when God calls a person into sacred silence. Not because they're afraid to speak, but because heaven understands something deeper. Sometimes, silence is the strongest shield for the soul. There are truths too tender to be entrusted to careless ears. There are treasures of the heart that lose their value when exposed to the wrong light. And so, in His divine wisdom, God whispers, "Don't speak of these things, not out of fear, but for your protection. Out of purpose, out of spiritual clarity. Some things are meant only for the altar. Some things are meant for the prayer closet, not the coffee table." In a world obsessed with oversharing and putting every detail of life on display, the sacredness of secrecy is being lost. But God is restoring it. He is reminding His people that some matters are holy, and He is calling them to keep them that way. God doesn't ask anyone to hide their light, but He does ask them to protect their pearls. The 5 things He calls us not to share aren't burdens. They are blessings. They are signs of spiritual maturity. They are not weights. They are wings. They lift a soul into a place where God is the only audience, and silence becomes a sanctuary. The first thing God calls for protection is the depth of a person's calling, because the world won't understand. Not everyone can comprehend what God reveals in the quiet of night. Not everyone will honor the vision He plants deep in a soul. When Joseph shared his dream with his brothers, it didn't inspire, it enraged. Speaking too soon about a divine appointment invites earthly resistance. Not because the dream is false, but because the soil isn't ready. God may give someone visions no one else sees, instructions no one else hears, burdens no one else feels. And it's not that person's job to convince the world, it's their job to obey. When divine whispers are exposed too early, their power can be diluted. What was holy becomes common. What was intimate becomes debated. In the effort to prove oneself, one can lose the presence of God. So when He says, "Hold it close," it's not punishment, it's preservation. In time, the calling will prove itself. The fruit will speak. The walk will preach. Obedience will become the answer. When the sacred is protected, God multiplies it. But when it's paraded before its time, it becomes vulnerable. Not everyone celebrates destiny. Some wait for a chance to sabotage it. So stay quiet. Stay faithful. Let the vision unfold in heaven's timing. The second thing God says never to share is the full extent of one's sacrifice. This world applauds performance, but heaven applauds humility. Sacrifice is not for show. It's not for likes, applause, or validation. The quiet obedience, the hidden tears, the sleepless nights of prayer, God sees it all, and He asks that it remain sacred. There's no need to announce every fast, every offering, every act of kindness. There's no need to prove how spiritual one is. The most powerful faith is often the most silent. Jesus taught that when one gives, even their left hand shouldn't know what the right hand is doing. Because true sacrifice isn't about recognition, it's about relationship. When someone speaks openly about what they've given up, they've already received their reward. But when it's done in secret, the Father who sees in secret will reward them openly. Some sacrifices will never be known to others, and that's okay, because the one who matters saw every moment. He saw the giving that cost something. He saw the prayers said for people who would never thank the one who prayed. That's sacred ground, meant to stay between the soul and God. The third thing God warns not to reveal is the battle one is still in. When someone is in the storm, that's not the moment to explain the wind. When walking through fire, it's not the time to describe the flames. It's the time to keep walking, to trust. Because if a person speaks too soon, their words may come from pain instead of purpose. There's a difference between testimony and a cry for help. A testimony is born from victory. It's the story after the battle is won. But if someone speaks too early, they might empower their enemy, invite doubt, or open the door to voices that won't heal, but harm. God isn't asking for silent suffering. He's calling people to seek Him first, to pour out pain before the one who understands. Because some battles are spiritual. Only prayer can shift them. Only worship can fight them. Only fasting can break them. Going public too early drains strength. There is healing in sharing, yes, but there is timing in revealing. Wait until the wound is closed, until the lesson is learned, until the story has become strength. That's when words bring clarity, not confusion. That's when the story gives others hope, not just a cry for sympathy. The fourth thing God says to keep private is good deeds done with wrong motives. It's easy to do the right thing for the wrong reason, to serve, give, and pray not from love, but for recognition, control, or approval. And if one isn't careful, even holiness becomes performance. God isn't moved by appearances. He's moved by the heart. A person can feed the poor and still be prideful, preach the gospel and still chase power, worship loudly while seeking validation. God sees past it all, and he cautions, don't flaunt your righteousness. Don't turn kindness into a campaign. The danger is subtle. When someone starts telling everyone what they've done, they may start believing that's who they are. They begin to trust works instead of grace. They chase perception over purity. Eventually, their faith becomes shallow. God wants works to flow from surrender, not strategy. From love, not leverage. From compassion, not calculation. So he says, don't tell. Just do. Just love. Just serve. Let a life preach louder than a mouth. Let humility speak louder than reputation. Heaven will record it. Eternity will remember. And when the time is right, God himself will honor it. Finally, the fifth thing God tells us to never share is the secrets he reveals to us alone. Some revelations are not for public consumption. Some things God shows in the secret place are meant to remain there. Not for sermons, not for blogs, not for posts. They're for the soul. When God gives a word, a dream, a divine insight, it is holy. And holiness requires reverence. Some revelations are too weighty for public interpretation. If shared too soon, they will be misunderstood. If shared too widely, they may be mocked. And worse, they could be distorted. God speaks in layers. And sometimes, what he gives isn't meant to be broadcast. It's meant to transform the one who received it. That kind of wisdom isn't always for the world. It's for the journey. And when kept sacred, it has the power to shape everything from within. Some truths aren't meant to be shouted from the rooftops the moment they arrive. They're designed to unfold slowly, delicately, and intentionally over time. When revelation is rushed, its impact is weakened. It's like pulling fruit from a tree before it ripens. What could have nourished ends up bitter and wasted. In the same way, spiritual truths must be allowed to mature before they're shared. There's a divine timing to every sacred thing. And when that rhythm is disrupted, something vital is lost. That's why, throughout the Gospels, Jesus would often tell those he healed or revealed himself to tell no one. Not because he was hiding who he was, but because he was protecting what was sacred. There's wisdom in waiting. There's strength in silence. And there's a deep reverence in withholding holy things until God says it's time. When God chooses to trust someone with a secret, a word, a calling, a glimpse of what's to come, it's not a casual gesture. It's a sign of intimacy. It's the mark of friendship between God and man. It means he sees that person not just as a servant, but as a confidant. And with that trust comes responsibility. The sacred must be guarded. The divine must be cherished. It's not about secrecy rooted in fear or shame. It's about sanctity, about understanding that not everything God gives is meant for the ears of the world, at least not yet. In a world obsessed with oversharing, God still whispers, hide some things. Because the things not said often shape us more deeply than the ones we do say. To remain silent when everything in you wants to speak, that takes maturity. That takes wisdom. That takes discernment. There's a difference between expressing and exposing, between a testimony and a temptation, between sharing a light and turning it into lightning. Not everything that is true is ready to be revealed. Some truths require silence to take root. God is calling his people to a higher level of discernment, to be people who don't just hear his voice, but know how to honor it. That means knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet, It means learning the holiness of secrecy, the beauty of hidden obedience, the glory of sacred silence. Because when something is truly from heaven, it must also be returned to heaven's timing. If he says wait, we wait. If he says keep it quiet, we cover it with care. And in doing so, we prove our trustworthiness. We prove our readiness. Many forget that divine purpose rarely begins with applause. It almost never starts in public. Instead, it begins in hidden places, in whispered prayers in the dark, in silent nudges that stir the soul, in moments where no one is watching but heaven. God does not announce our calling to the crowd. He speaks it in secret. And he does that for a reason, because what is holy is not meant to be put on display until it has been refined, tested, and made ready. When God shows someone their purpose, it often feels thrilling. The vision is fresh. The promise feels close. The fire burns in their bones. But that fire isn't yet ready to burn in the open. It must first burn away the ego. It must refine the character, deepen the faith, and stretch the obedience of the one who carries it. And this can only happen in silence, in seasons of hiddenness, where no one sees the growth except God himself. And that hidden season, it's not punishment. It's not delay. It's protection. It's divine preparation. It's where the soil of the soul is tilled, where the roots of identity dig deep. It's where faith is no longer a feeling, but a foundation. It's where obedience is no longer reactive, but rooted. It's in the quiet that trust is tested, that patience is stretched, that spiritual maturity is forged. So many make the mistake of speaking too soon, of shouting their dreams before they're anchored, of announcing a promise before it's fully formed. Like Joseph, who shared his God-given dream with his brothers before he understood its weight, before the environment was ready, and before he was ready. His dream was real, but his timing was off. And because of that, his words stirred jealousy, not joy. Not because the dream wasn't true, but because he was early. A calling from God will speak for itself in time. There won't be a need to prove it. The fruit will reveal the root. The evidence will rise on its own. But in the early stages, the vision is fragile. Exposing it too soon can invite criticism, misunderstanding, and worst of all, discouragement. That discouragement can weaken a person's faith before their purpose has even had the chance to grow. So God, in his mercy, hides what he treasures. He conceals what he's cultivating, not to keep it from the world forever, but to give it the chance to grow strong enough to withstand it. In a hidden season, God is doing far more than it seems. He's developing the unseen, strengthening the soul, teaching how to obey when no one is watching. That's where character is built. That's where faith is purified. That's where purpose becomes more than a dream. It becomes a lifestyle. And in that quiet, sacred space, he invites his people to hold what he's spoken close, to protect it, to nurture it, to wait on him. Because there will come a day when the doors will open, when the vision will blossom, when the promise will come to life before the eyes of many. And when that day comes, there will be no need for fanfare, no need for explanation. The life will speak. The obedience will shine. The fruit will testify. And until that day comes, God sees what others don't. He sees the sacrifices made in secret, the nights spent in prayer when sleep wouldn't come, the money given when none could be spared, the acts of love carried out without applause. He sees the quiet faithfulness, the hidden devotion, and he promises that what is done in secret, he will one day reward in the open. So to those walking in silence, know this, you are not forgotten. You are being formed, and when the time is right, God himself will lift the veil. Not with noise, not with force, but with undeniable glory. There are moments when a person chooses to forgive, even when it costs them their pride, their comfort, even their peace. These sacrifices, though unseen by the world, shine brightest in the eyes of heaven. They are not made for public display, but are instead holy offerings wrapped in humility and laid silently before God. But there's a danger that comes when someone tries to turn these sacred acts into stories of admiration. The moment good deeds are shared for the purpose of being noticed, they lose their eternal weight. What was once a gift to God becomes a performance for people. And with that shift, the divine reward is traded for something far smaller. The fleeting applause of an audience that may never understand the depth of what was given. And when the applause dies down, as it always does, so does the strength. Because the strength never came from the act itself, but from the one it was done for. Jesus warned of this very thing. He spoke of the hypocrites who gave loudly, prayed proudly, and fasted openly, not to draw near to God, but to draw attention to themselves. He said, they have received their reward. In other words, the praise of men was all they would get. Not heaven's approval, not divine recognition, just noise. What a terrible trade that is. Eternal blessings, exchanged for momentary validation. True sacrifice doesn't require an audience. Real faith doesn't crave applause. What is done in secret is honored in heaven. God sees what no one else does. He knows what it cost. He hears the silent prayers. He sees the self-denial. He feels the pain hidden behind obedience. And he remembers every tear that was shed in private. There is a sacredness in keeping those sacrifices unspoken. When someone offers something deeply personal to God, it isn't just about the act, it's a declaration that says, Lord, it's enough that you see me. It's enough that you know. That kind of faith is rare. That kind of heart is precious. Let the world witness the fruit of that faith, not the price paid for it. Let the story be told not by announcements of sacrifice, but by the grace that follows. The most powerful testimonies are the ones heaven tells about those who stayed silent, hands open, heart surrendered. So walk quietly, give without noise, serve humbly, surrender joyfully, and when no one else is clapping, heaven will. That applause will echo for eternity. In the middle of a battle, things get uncertain. The winds roar, the path fades, the heart grows heavy, and faith is tested in ways unimaginable. It's only natural in those moments to want to explain, to share the pain, to be understood. But there is wisdom in silence during the storm. God often does his greatest work in the darkest nights. Not when words are loud, but when trust is deep. When someone chooses to stay quiet and let him lead. In the heat of battle, emotions run high. Understanding is limited. Speaking too soon can open the door to discouragement. Words, especially when spoken in pain, can invite the wrong kind of opinions, ones not rooted in faith, but in fear, doubt, or even envy. And sometimes, those words fall on ears that don't know how to handle the weight, or worse, twist it for harm. Not every battle is meant to be shared. Some victories are born in secret, behind closed doors, with tear-streaked faces and whispered prayers. When struggles are spoken about before being surrendered to God, the process risks being misunderstood. It welcomes voices that distract rather than strengthen. And the enemy listens too. He watches closely when wounds are exposed, using those premature confessions to plant seeds of fear and confusion. But when someone chooses silence, they remain under the shadow of the Almighty, protected, unseen, untouchable. There will be a time to speak after the battle is won, when deliverance has come, when faith has been proven. That's when the voice carries power. That's when the story inspires, not confuses. That's when people listen, not to the pain, but to the perseverance. Silence in the storm is not weakness, it's wisdom. It is an act of trust that says, God, I don't understand, but I walk with you anyway. It refuses to reach for human validation and clings instead to divine direction. That kind of faith shakes heaven. That kind of silence becomes a weapon. So in the storm, draw closer to God. Let him be the counselor, the comforter, the defender. Speak to him, trust him, hide in him. And when the dust settles, when the light breaks through, rise, not just with a story, but with a testimony stamped with the fragrance of heaven. There's a subtle danger in doing good for the wrong reasons. On the surface, it might look noble, helping the poor, serving at church, giving generously. But if the motive is rooted in pride or self-promotion, the spiritual power behind the act is lost. God is not impressed by performance. He is moved by purity. Motives can't be hidden from him. He sees beyond the action, into the heart. While people see what's done, God sees why it's done. Every word, every gesture, every gift, he weighs the intention. That's why Scripture warns against performing righteousness for the sake of being seen, because the reward for that is immediate and empty. Attention doesn't last. Praise fades. Good deeds done for applause are like leaves without roots, momentarily bright, eternally barren. God is not honored by acts designed to impress. He is honored by what's done when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one even knows. Those are the moments that heaven treasures. Love should not be loud, it should be deep. Giving should not be dramatic, it should be sincere. Kindness should not be a performance. It should be the overflow of a heart changed by grace. True goodness doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need a hashtag. It just is. Quiet, humble, steady. This doesn't mean one should hide their light. Jesus said to let it shine, but not so others will praise you, so they will glorify God. The goal is not attention, but reflection. A life that mirrors heaven, not a stage for personal glory. It takes humility to serve without recognition. It takes maturity to be unseen and still pour out love. But that's where the blessing is. That's where heaven leans in. Every unseen act, every quiet gift, every small kindness, given with a pure heart, it's all remembered. God doesn't forget. He rewards those who seek his glory over their own. So before acting, the heart must be checked. Who is this for? If the answer is God, then no other validation is needed. His approval will be enough. His presence will satisfy, and his rewards, though unseen now, will one day exceed all imagination. Let life be filled with goodness that seeks no recognition. Let love be real. Let service be silent. Let motives remain pure. Because in the end, it's not about what was done, it's about why. And when the why is right, everything else will fall into place. And sometimes, in the quiet, God whispers something only the soul can hear. There are moments in life when a revelation comes, so deep, so sacred, that only the person receiving it can truly understand it. These divine insights aren't meant for casual conversations or public declarations. They're entrusted by God with intention to guide, shape, and transform the individual into who they are called to be. Sharing them prematurely or with the wrong people can open doors to confusion, doubt, and even mockery. When God speaks, he does so with purpose. And sometimes, the truths he reveals are too powerful to be spoken carelessly. These revelations aren't simply knowledge to be shared. They're the very blueprint for one's spiritual growth. They are meant to be pondered in silence, prayed over, and nurtured in the stillness of the heart until the right time comes for them to be revealed. God entrusts these insights not as commodities to flaunt, but as sacred gifts. In the Bible, we see this with Joseph. He received a dream, a vision of greatness, of his family bowing before him. But when he shared it, his brothers weren't ready to hear it. The timing was off. Their jealousy and anger became the catalyst for the hardship he endured on the path to his destiny. The revelation was true, but the seed was sown too early. It should have been planted deep within, allowed to grow in silence. Not everyone is prepared to handle what God has shown. Some will misunderstand, others will mock, and some, even with good intentions, may bring fear or doubt. That's why silence can often be the wisest response to a divine revelation. In silence, the sacredness of God's voice is protected, and in due time, the truth will reveal itself. Sharing too soon can lead not only to misunderstanding, but even to spiritual sabotage. The wrong words, spoken at the wrong time, can make someone question whether they truly heard from God. Even a most well-meaning listener might respond with limited perspective, causing second-guessing. This is why it's vital to guard what has been given. When revelations are protected, so too is the spiritual journey. It gives that insight time to mature in the quiet places. It shows trust in God's timing, and he will bring the right people at the right moment. People who will affirm, encourage, and support what he is doing. Some truths aren't for the world to see. Not every divine whisper is meant for a platform. Many revelations are designed for personal transformation, for quiet prayers, private obedience, and sacred growth. There is no need to validate or prove these moments. When the time is right, God Himself will bring them into the light. When we protect the secrets God entrusts to us, we're also protecting the divine work unfolding within us. And eventually, that work bears fruit, not just for the individual, but for others. So discernment, patience, and wisdom become essential in safeguarding what is sacred. There's a profound power in silence. In a noisy world obsessed with constant communication, silence can feel unnatural. But it is in those quiet moments when the tongue is held and the heart is still that God often moves most powerfully. Sacred silence is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence of spiritual maturity. It marks someone who has learned to listen more than speak, to wait on God's timing rather than act on impulse. God honors those who know when to be silent. Wisdom grows in silence. Wisdom that comes from a heart shaped by the Spirit. There's a strong temptation to defend oneself, respond quickly, or speak out of emotion. But true maturity knows that not every battle requires words. Not every disagreement needs a rebuttal. Sometimes the most powerful statement is made by saying nothing at all. Discretion is a mark of maturity. It's the ability to discern what should be said, when it should be said, and what should be left unspoken. In a world where everyone has a voice, the discipline of silence becomes a rare and powerful gift. There is indeed a time to speak, but there is also a time to listen, to wait, and to trust that God is working in the silence. Humility fuels that silence. In withholding words, we're declaring, God is in control. I don't need to be heard. His will, not mine, be done. That kind of surrender speaks volumes. It shows an understanding that God's plan doesn't rely on human effort or explanation. When people rush to speak or act, they can step outside of God's will. But when they choose silence, they give space for God to move in His own way, in His own time. Obedience is at the heart of sacred silence. God often asks for silence not as punishment, but as protection. He knows that hasty words can harm relationships, stir confusion, and cause unnecessary damage. But the right words, spoken at the right moment, bring healing and peace. Choosing to remain silent reflects the heart of Christ. Even Jesus, though innocent and falsely accused, remained silent before His accusers. He didn't engage in every argument or defend Himself against every lie. His mission wasn't to win debates. It was to fulfill the will of the Father. And in that silence, the greatest victory was won. So sacred silence isn't about avoiding confrontation or hiding from responsibility. It's about knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. It's about trusting that God's voice will always be louder than ours, and that He will speak for us when it matters most. This kind of restraint is a sign of deep trust. It means letting go of the need for validation, choosing to let God work behind the scenes, and allowing His presence to shape, refine, and prepare the soul for greater things. And more often than not, it's in that silence where His presence is felt most deeply.